Caffeine stimulates the release of dopamine in a way that's very much distinct from the classical dopamine pathway associated with addiction and reward. In fact, we can think of caffeine as having a somewhat privileged access to the reward systems.
Imagine a morning routine that could either drive you to peak performance or send you crashing into an afternoon slump. But what if I told you that you could optimize your daily morning coffee ritual to boost focus, energy, and performance all day long? In this video, we'll be exploring neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman's fascinating research on how to hack your caffeine intake. Applying Dr. Huberman's morning caffeine hack can revolutionize your days by giving you sustained energy, razor-sharp focus, and peak performance without the jittery side effects. You'll be amazed at how such a small tweak can transform how you feel. If you're like most coffee drinkers, your daily ritual goes something like this. Stumble to the coffee maker first thing after rolling out of bed and chug back that sweet cup of liquid energy. The caffeine jolt helps kickstart your brain and get you ready for the day ahead. But what if I told you that this common habit could be seriously sabotaging your energy levels? Here's the deal. Most people are drinking their coffee all wrong, according to renowned neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman. The problem with downing coffee right after waking up is that it often leads to an energy and focus crash later in the afternoon. Ever notice how you feel super wired after your first few cups, only to be dragging a few hours later? That's your caffeine rhythm backfiring. See, when you drink coffee first thing, the caffeine stimulates the release of cortisol to help you get alert and energized. But cortisol is meant to follow a natural pattern, peaking in the morning, then declining throughout the day as melatonin rises to promote sleep. Guzzling coffee too early throws off that cortisol curve. You get an initial spike, but then cortisol and energy levels plummet just when you need to power through the afternoon. That's why you find your focus fading and start yawning around 3 p.m., even if you've had several cups of joe. Now you're reaching for more caffeine just to claw your way through the rest of the day. Talk about a downward spiral. So what's the solution? Simply delay your morning coffee just a little later, according to Dr. Huberman's research. Here are the details on how to fix your caffeine rhythm for good. Through careful caffeine research, Dr. Huberman discovered that delaying your first coffee by 90 to 120 minutes after waking can work wonders compared to drinking it right away. Here's why the latter timing is the magic bullet. That 90-minute window early in the morning is critical for clearing out a chemical called adenosine from your system.
The other thing that caffeine does, and this is perhaps the most important one, is that it effectively prevents the action of a molecule called adenosine. Adenosine is a molecule that builds up the longer that you are awake, and then when you sleep, adenosine gets pushed back down to a minimal level. Adenosine essentially is a readout of fatigue overall. So if we were to stay up for 2 days, adenosine levels would be very high.
Adenosine accumulates the longer you're awake, making you feel groggy and fatigued. It sticks around from the prior day, especially if you haven't had quite a night of good sleep. What caffeine does is, it acts as sort of competition to adenosine, binding itself to the receptors and neutralizing its effects on energy. Hence, we get the lovely effects associated with coffee like wakefulness and increased vigor. But drinking caffeine too early inhibits adenosine clearance, so it continues building up. Once the caffeine wears off, the floodgates are open and adenosine takes over, creating that famous afternoon crash. But by holding off on caffeine, adenosine is flushed out naturally. You'll feel more awake without needing as much caffeine.
So one way that you can avoid the afternoon crash, or at least offset quite a bit of it, is to wait 90 to 120 minutes after you wake up to ingest any caffeine.
And so adenosine lowers.
Adenosine will continue to be cleared from your system in the early part of the day. And there's also, now it appears to be what I think is an interesting effect of exercise early in the day, close to waking, so in the first 3 hours of waking, will also help clear adenosine.
Come mid-morning, when adenosine creep returns, you can drink coffee without the early spike and crash. The key is spacing your caffeine intake to match your body's natural cortisol rhythm. Research shows that sipping half your normal dose upon waking Then the other half an hour later creates a smooth extended caffeine curve. No more roller coaster energy and focus. Along with optimizing timing, Dr. Huberman recommends keeping your daily caffeine intake between 100 and 400 milligrams. That's around 1 to 3 cups of coffee for most people. Staying in this sweet spot avoids overdoing it.
So in terms of a practical tool, I do try and restrict my caffeine intake, or at least most of it, to the early part of the day. I'll stop drinking caffeine usually around 3 or 4 p.m. I don't drink any high amount of caffeine after 4 p.m. and generally not coffee.
Now let's explore exactly how following Dr. Huberman's sage caffeine advice can revolutionize your days. Just by shifting your coffee timing and intake, you can expect incredible benefits. The most obvious perk you'll notice from this coffee makeover is smooth, non-stop energy without the crash. Instead of rocketing up and then down, your energy pattern will be an ascending hill that plateaus. No more relying on copious amounts of caffeine to artificially override your afternoon fatigue. It's amazing how delaying that first cup for just an hour or so prevents the caffeine spike crash cycle. You'll feel refreshed and motivated to power through your whole day without an afternoon slump. Another massive benefit you'll experience is dialed-in concentration and mental clarity all day without getting the jitters. Research shows caffeine makes you faster and more accurate on cognitive tasks. Caffeine also increases dopamine receptors, which control motivation and reward. This makes it easier to get into flow states for long periods of deep work. Think your coffee habit is just for mental boosts? Think again. Timed properly, caffeine can enhance your physical performance too. Studies demonstrate that having caffeine 30 minutes to an hour before challenging exercise increases strength and endurance and lowers perceived exertion. Caffeine allows you to tap deeper energy reserves, push harder, and go longer without feeling fatigued. Here's an incredible caffeinated benefit. You'll simply feel happier, more motivated, and excited about your days. No more morning dread or afternoon blahs. By smoothing your caffeine intake, you'll avoid irritability, anxiety, and crashes. This creates the foundation for consistent cheerfulness and drive. Caffeine stimulates dopamine, your motivational and feel-good molecule. With receptors optimized all day, you'll pursue goals with blissful energy. Does it get any better than that? Looking for longevity perks? Good news! Studies indicate regular coffee drinkers have a lower risk for serious conditions like Parkinson's disease, heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Moderate caffeine intake may also offer protection against cognitive decline. By optimizing your coffee habit, you could also reduce your dementia risk too. While excessive caffeine can be harmful, drinking 3 to 5 cups per day appears protective for long-term health. Make sure your intake aligns with Dr. Huberman's wise guidelines. Sleep is vital for looking and feeling your best. The good news is that timing caffeine properly earlier in the day won't disrupt your sleep like afternoon coffee does. Since caffeine's effects last about 12 hours, it's wise to avoid it after 2 p.m. if you sleep around 10 p.m. With a later schedule, caffeine won't be lingering to keep you tossing and turning. You'll conk out faster, sleep more deeply, and wake more refreshed. Your new caffeine habit will leave you energized and renewed both day and night. Remember, by delaying your first cup just 60 to 90 minutes and spacing your intake, Dr. Huberman's caffeine hack allows you to ride an energizing wave all day long. Now, I know change isn't easy. Shifting your treasured coffee routine may feel uncomfortable at first, but trust me, the effort is so worth it. Who knew such a small tweak could make such an enormous difference? Now it's time to take this research and apply it to transform your days. Make sure you stick to the tips and give it 2 to 3 weeks to see the benefits firsthand. I think you'll be blown away by how amazing you feel with your new coffee habit. Want to keep boosting your performance? Check out this next video that explains how physiological size can help you relieve anxiety and sleep better.